The second half of the Major League Baseball season has gotten underway, and the St. Louis Cardinals find themselves right in the middle of a wild card race, with the finish line being the postseason. What will the Cardinals have to do to get there? That will be the topic of discussion for episode number 121 of the Lou Sports Talk podcast. I'm your host, Ethan Hannaford. He is Dylan Hampel. Dylan, a boatload of stuff has happened since you last joined us, but it's a pleasure to have you on tonight. How you doing, my friend?
Yeah, it's been a minute indeed. Apologies in advance. I'm coming off a little bit of a cold, so if I sound croaky, apologies to all listeners out there. But yes, so stoked to be back. And man, the World Cup just wrapped up. The Stanley Cup and the NBA Finals been over for a minute now. Now we have nothing but baseball for more than a month until we have football, baby. I could not be more excited to watch the Cardinals as they go into the second half push.
You may sound croaky, but you don't look croaky, if you know what I mean. Yeah, it's going to be a good one.
Don't patronize me.
Going to be a good one. Appreciative of all of you joining us for this one, whether you are watching on STL Sports Central's YouTube. Please go and like and subscribe to them. That does a lot for all of us here with STL Sports Central. And then if you are listening as well, go ahead and follow us on our Instagram, X, and Facebook accounts at Lou Sports Talk _. We know how good of a first half of the season it was for our Redbirds, Dylan, who getting to the midway point or a little beyond the midway point, the All-Star break, held a 50-45 record, a record identical to last season up to that point through 95 games in the season. We know how things went post All-Star break last year. The hope is that things are going to go a little bit differently this year. And it is funny, Dylan, just to start, how similar, when you walk through everything pretty much from May beyond, just how similar the records have been from the 2025 team to the 26 team, simultaneously, while recognizing that the two teams feel very different. In one, the atmosphere around the team, in the clubhouse, how they are being perceived by fans, the age of the team, certainly. A lot of different things despite similar records. Would you agree with that?
I would definitely agree. There's been a lot of roster turnover compared to last season as well. I think that's part of the reason why it feels so different. And it is strange to look at the comparison of how similar, I mean, exactly the same the records are, but I think a lot of that has to do with as well the Cardinals turning downward a little bit heading into the break. I mean, I think they've won 7 out of their last 17 series, if I'm not mistaken. So been a little bit of a decline, and definitely we saw a similar pattern with last year's Cardinals when they had that explosive month of May, I believe. But obviously this team has felt like the success is more sustainable because of the young core that has come about right before our eyes and is impressed, to say the least.
Yeah, Dylan, I think you could argue that there are several surprises as far as what you have gotten out of this first half from this team. And it's a reason as to why St. Louis is where they are. And it only sets them up for more success in the future and perhaps speeds up this timeline a little bit if some of this success is to continue that you have gotten from certain pieces of this roster. We know that the 1 through 4 has been just as good as any in baseball when you look at a lot of the combined stats from 1 through 4 in the lineup, which has included JJ Wetherholt, who the St. Louis Cardinals just locked up long-term, as well as Jordan Walker, Alec Burleson, Ivan Herrera. You have a 1 through 4 in the lineup that is combined for the 4th best batting average in baseball, the 10th most runs batted in, the 3rd least amount of strikeouts, the 2nd highest on-base percentage at .354, and the 8th highest OPS at .794, just under 800. You put that up against any 1 through 4, in my opinion, in Major League Baseball. What you've gotten out of them up to this point has been a really pleasant surprise to a certain extent. And I guess the biggest one being just how quickly JJ Wetherholt has looked comfortable. And then on top of that, Jordan Walker has been able to take these steps to go from massive bust to MLB superstar is what it feels like. And it's not only on the offensive side. There certainly have been names on the pitching side as well. But, maybe this feels repetitive over the weeks discussing this. But 1 through 4 in the lineup has to be up to this point, the biggest win of this 2026 season.
For sure, and it's been incredible to watch. You have two guys in Walker and Burleson who are top 5 in all of baseball in runs batted in, and Walker leads the league in RBIs. It's been incredible seeing those two, and I mean, Burleson even has more doubles than Walker. He's become Mr. Consistent and also stepped into that leadership role as the veterans have departed in this new era of locker room for the Cardinals. So yes, it's been incredible, and it's been wonderful seeing Wetherholt exceed expectations. I love seeing Ivan Herrera's on base percentage continue to stay high. Hopefully he's able to endure the continued hit by pitches. But yeah, it's pretty crazy hearing you say those numbers, just how good what we've been watching has been. And I haven't seen any indicators that would say it's going to fall off a cliff. So knock on wood, it's been a blast, at least for the top four of the lineup.
And then on the other side of the ball, Dylan, you've had several pitchers, I think, that you have gotten more out of than you probably expected to going into the season, that including Michael McGreevy, Kyle Leahy, Andre Palante. All three of those guys, in my opinion, have exceeded expectations in the rotation. It has created less pressure, in my opinion, on Matthew Liberatore in what you expected him to be within this rotation. I think probably most people would have said, yeah, he's your number 2 probably. I mean, he was the opening day starter. So maybe some people had him as the number 1 in their eyes. He hasn't lived up to the expectations, but because you've been getting it from other places, I don't think that pressure has necessarily gone on him. And Dustin May, been a weird season. There's been some good. There's been some really bad. It's been very streaky. I mean, the first 2 starts of the year, Dustin May's ERA was just a touch under 16. He combined for only a 7 1/3 innings thrown. From April 10th to June 15th, he had a 2.54 ERA in his 12 starts. His whip was under 1. And then the past month, over his last 5 starts, the ERA is just under 10. So weird stretch from Dustin May. Probably not the most ideal time for him to be having the struggles that he is, with the trade deadline nearing only a couple of weeks away. All that to be said, you've still gotten contributions from him, I would argue, at least 2/3 of the season up to this point. More good than bad from him. So you probably look at that and you say that's about 3.5 starting pitchers that you feel pretty good about what you have gotten. I think that overall, maybe it averages out to where it would have been if you look at Andre Palante and you say, well, he was supposed to be this, so he's elevated, but Matthew Liberatore has gone down. So it probably averages out, but it is encouraging to see that other guys have been able to step up in some of those roles.
Yeah, I did not have Michael McGreevy leading the team in ERA on my bingo card with the 2.92 in the first half of the season. I mean, it's just been incredible, especially him being a pitch to contact guy. You mentioned May having having blow ups, but still being good overall for the most part. And yeah, Andre Palante, this was a guy that most of us, I think most of Cardinal Nation, thought he may be off the roster after the season, which is still possible, but it's been nice. It's been a very pleasant surprise seeing him overperform and being able to give you innings. I mean, he's second on the team in innings with 105 1/3 through the first half. So it's been a joy to see, as you said, kind of average out. You're bummed for seeing Liberatore his season go the way it has, but Kyle Leahy has been serviceable for the most part. So it's not been world beating, but it hasn't been the disasters that we've seen in years previous, where you have Miles Michaelis going 6 innings and giving up 10 hits and 8 earned.
And that brings us into our transition of what the second half looks like for the St. Louis Cardinals. Some of the biggest keys going into this second half that can help propel them to getting back to the postseason for the first time since 2022. They are locked in a heated wild card race with several other teams, including one of the teams they just most recently played. Disappointing results against the Arizona Diamondbacks. The Miami Marlins are in the mix, as well as several other teams. On the other side, keys to the St. Louis Cardinals getting back to the postseason right here on the Lou Sports Talk podcast. Welcome back to the Lou Sports Talk podcast. Dylan Hampel, Ethan Hannaford. Pleased that you are joining us on STL Sports Central or Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Either way, thankful for all of our listeners and viewers. Let's go ahead and jump into Key number one for the St. Louis Cardinals to make the postseason is getting enough out of your starting pitching. We mentioned just before the break, the pause, that the St. Louis Cardinals have been able to average out what they have gotten in large part from this rotation, balancing out Matthew Liberatore's struggles, Dustin May's at times, with strong seasons from Kyle Leahy, Andre Pallante, Michael McGreevy especially as well. You're going to be entering into an interesting time, though, with this starting rotation because, Dylan, the rotation might be looking a little bit different here in the upcoming weeks. With the trade deadline looming, we know that Dustin May certainly is a name that the Cardinals could end up moving on from. He does have a mutual option for the 2027 season, I believe $20 million, but there's not a guarantee that the Cardinals are going to want to do that. So if they decide that they are not going to want to do that, then it makes sense to trade him. If they are to trade him, then that is one proven arm down in this rotation for now that is already very young, and taking out Dustin May certainly would drop the average age by several years. Dylan, when you look at this rotation, what it is now compared to what it could be in, let's say, 2 to 4 weeks, what do you expect the biggest changes to be? Do you think Dustin May will likely get traded? Do you think that there is anyone else that could end up being pulled from this rotation? What do you expect the changes in this rotation to look like?
I think Dustin May is the elephant in the room. I would be more surprised if he is here post-deadline than if he gets moved, because I think there's going to be interest in him having a relatively, bounce-back season. He's healthy, which is the most important thing for teams right now. So I think that he will be the obvious missing piece potentially, but the Cardinals also aren't as much of a pencil in for, selling at this deadline as they were at the start of the season because of the surprise success that they've had. So it's not as, shoe-in guarantee May is going to be gone as I would have said earlier on in the season. But I would still say that he's the number one going to be gone, or likely to be gone, I should say, from this rotation. And then you also have people who have talked about maybe moving Kyle Leahy back to the bullpen at some point this season. I definitely don't think that would happen prior to the deadline, but I think that we can talk about the bullpen a little bit more later on. But I think that this appendicitis for JoJo Romero and the subsequent, signing of Scott Blewett, I think that maybe if he's out of options, so if things don't end up panning out for Blewett, then maybe potentially you could have Leahy moving to the bullpen in that spot, but that's all just conjecture. I think that definitely the largest change will be May. And I mean, I don't think they would make a drastic move with Liberatore, sending him to Memphis or anything like that prior to August 3rd, but that's just my opinion.
I don't expect for Matthew Liberatore to move out of this rotation at any point this season. I think that Michael McGreevy is cemented in. Those two slam dunks. Could you make an argument for Andre Pallante? Maybe. And the only reason that you would is this wouldn't be to move to the bullpen or to be sent down. This would be potentially, maybe you're looking at trading him if you have an intriguing enough offer from someone that wants controllable starting pitching, if you don't feel as though he is a part of the long-term plan. Now, I don't think that's going to happen. I expect for Andre Pallante to be in this rotation for the remainder of the season. I think that he has proven enough, and I think that he has enough term remaining on his contract. This was his second year of arbitration, so next year would be ARB 3, 2028 would be ARB 4, 2029 is when he is UFA eligible. So, you're looking at 2 more seasons of full control for Andre Pallante. Doesn't make sense, really, in my opinion, to do much with him. The ones that seem the most clear to me are Dustin May, as we've been discussing. I think that the Cardinals have enough pitching talent that they feel is getting close to where there's just not going to be enough room for everyone next season Dustin May being here, I don't know if it entirely makes sense. Now, I'll say this. There's multiple ways you could look at this. Dustin May's last 5 starts have not been good. In fact, they've been really ugly, almost as ugly as the first couple were at the beginning of the season. How much of that has hurt his trade value? I don't know. When we were saying it was 2 to 3 starts of this, I wasn't concerned because there was enough from that middle 2-month chunk of the season that I was looking at that more so and saying, Chaim Bloom is smart enough. Baseball front office executives are smart enough to look at that and say, this is more so what he is, because you've gotten a lot more of the good May than you have the bad May. But I do think that recency bias does matter. We're getting now to crunch time, and Dustin May is continuing to struggle. If Dustin May comes back out and over his next 2 starts gets back to a much better version of himself, we're seeing a 6-inning guy, 1-2 runs given up, 7-8 strikeouts. Like if we see him get back to that, I think that could go a long way, because I think that these starts, the more that they have stacked up, have hurt his trade value. Now, with that being said, it also depends on how exactly the Cardinals look at him. If they say, listen, $20 million for a guy that is cemented into this rotation, we feel confident in the good that we have gotten out of him. The team is maybe exceeding expectations a little bit. We feel like we're going to be closer to competing in 27 than we initially thought. Let's go ahead and hold on to him. Then maybe they don't trade him. I don't see them being there. I expect for Dustin May to get traded, because I think that they feel as though enough young pitching talent within the organization is close enough to where they're going to want to give that talent some opportunities as soon as this year. The other one is Kyle Leahy. You mentioned him just a moment ago. There's a few different ways in which you could handle Kyle Leahy, but you have to first address why you are considering doing this with Kyle Leahy. It has nothing to do with the performance this season. In fact, like I said, I've been extremely happy with Kyle Leahy. A 7-4 record, 3.73 ERA in his 18 starts, 89 and a third innings thrown, 75 strikeouts, 33 walks, a whip maybe a tad bit high at 1.41, but overall, very satisfied with what you got out of him in the first half of the season. The most notable part about every single number that I mentioned was his innings thrown, and that was 89.1. In the first half, he threw more innings as a starter than he did in all of 2025 as a reliever. He threw 88. The last time that Leahy was stretched out as a starter was 2022, when he threw 144 innings, 141 of them coming out of Double-A. Hasn't touched 100 innings since then. That was 4 years ago. What is the cap going to be for Kyle Leahy this year? 120 innings, 130 innings. How far does that take him into the season? Do we see him continue to go 5+ innings? How deep into the season would that get him? Do we see the Cardinals maybe go a little bit more conservative with his starts and it turns into 3 to 4 innings so that they can preserve him and he can make it to the end of the season? Either way, the Cardinals are going to have to figure out who is going to fill in for those innings, because you have a gassed out bullpen, so you're going to need to find a way to fill it in somewhere, whether they shut down Kyle Leahy or someone comes in and becomes that piggyback guy along with him. So there's a few options. We've seen a couple of them this year. Others we have not. The first two we have seen, they're already on the 40-man roster. Dylan, the first one being Brycen Mautz, who during AAA this season has shown some really promising numbers. 2.92 ERA, 16 games started, 17 appearances, 1 relief appearance, first time out of the bullpen in the minors, Dylan, this past weekend. Very curious as to what that means for how Brycen Mautz is going to be used later this year. 71 innings thrown, 71 strikeouts, the batter's average against at 202. He's walked a lot of guys, 51 walks, the whip at 1.45. That is higher than you'd prefer. But I'm very curious with that relief appearance, what that could spell for Brycen Mautz, how he gets used later this year. Maybe they don't see an alleyway for him to be in the rotation. We know, obviously, that the bullpen needs help right now with JoJo Romero going down. Brycen Mautz, another lefty. Something that we can definitely talk about once we get deeper into the episode. The other one being Hunter Dobbins. Dobbins has gotten a little bit of time at the Major League level, 5 appearances, 3 of them being starts. Pretty similar stuff when you look at the numbers compared to the majors and the minors and what guys have been able to do against him. The ERA right around 4 in either of them. Had a couple of really big piggyback performances out of the bullpen where the Cardinals desperately needed him, and he was able to step up and come through. I think he is an option to potentially start for this team as well. And then the final one, someone that is not on the 40-man roster, so maybe it makes this decision a little bit more difficult, but I think out of all 3 of them, he is the one that is the most highly regarded. One of the top 10 prospects in the Cardinals system is Quinn Mathews, who we know has had concerns, has had issues over the past couple of seasons, had that great year a couple of years ago where he was the Cardinals minor league pitcher of the year, pitched his way all the way through the system and made it to AAA in one season, and then dealt with some issues, had some trouble with the new baseball at the AAA level. Walks were an issue. He's over all of that, Dylan. The numbers have been excellent in AAA this year, a 3.39 ERA in his 18 games started, has struck out 101 batters. Opponents are batting 173 against him, and the whip is at 1.16. Get this, since June, his ERA is 1.79, striking out 49 batters in 41 innings, and opponents are batting 130 against him. And I believe he has a scoreless inning streak going on right now that is, I believe, around 17. So this is a guy that is clearly on a heater right now, and that heater is stretched out. We're getting close to 2 months now. He's getting to the point, Dylan, where he's banging on the door. Now, it's a matter of how, there's a lot of questions. He's not on the 40-man. You potentially have a lockout pending. That changes how you can communicate and work with minor league prospects if he's on the 40-man or not. So that's a question mark, certainly. But if you feel like he's ready to go, these could be an important couple of months for a guy like Quinn Mathews to get some major league experience. The talent is there. He might be the only one out of all 3 of those guys that you could compare to Dustin May and say, you're not getting any worse by putting Quinn Mathews on this roster right now. So I know I've been talking for a while now, but I wanted to make it clear what the Cardinals' options were if they were to trade Dustin May, and if at some point Kyle Leahy needed to be shut down for the remainder of the season. I think there's enough options within the organization right now that are close to being ready to go, or you could argue are ready to go, Dylan, that could make a difference or at least fill those holes well enough for the Cardinals.
You're right. Yeah, I think that Mathews would be the replacement for May should he be moved, and he's knocking on the door, as you said. And what a blessing it is, as we've talked about before, to have this abundance of depth now. And as you mentioned, Dobbins is another option. Me personally, I'm okay with stretching Leahy a little bit. I completely understand the reasoning of wanting to be conservative, especially as you get deeper into the season. If you're still contending, we need innings in this wild card race, and Kyle Leahy's starting to fizzle a bit, then yes, completely understand the rationale of wanting to shut him down or move him to the pen, whatever it may be. But as for right now, I mean, in his last 7 starts, he's 2-1 with 34 1/3 innings pitched, so a little under 5 innings a game, which I understand is not the most sustainable for your bullpen. But he has a 2.88 ERA, a 1.17 WHIP, 29 strikeouts, and 11 walks and 11 earned runs. So it hasn't been anything. I know 7 starts is a long time. It's not like it's his last 3 starts, and there's still no sign of slowing down. But at least for me, I haven't seen any drastic indicators of fatigue the way we kind of saw with Matthew Liberatore last year. But if he starts showing that, then I am on board with pulling the plug.
And that's going to be something that they're going to have to monitor. I imagine that there is going to be a full plan as to how they will want to go about that. You could have argued a similar thing for Matthew Liberatore last year, and he started through the end of the season, even when some people wanted him to get shut down because clearly there was some battles with fatigue that were going on as the season went on, and he threw through the end of the season. So maybe Kyle Leahy does end up throwing through the end of the year. He's done it before. He's thrown 140 innings before, but it's just been a few years. So you just wonder where the state of that arm is. It's a different level of innings, much more high leverage, much more difficult innings, a lot more preparation. 162 is a different beast. So I don't know what exactly it looks like for Kyle Leahy, but it goes a long way if he is in a position where he is able to pitch throughout the entire season. That is 100% a fact. So let me ask you this, Dylan. Prediction time, and maybe this doesn't age well, but let's just do it. Let's go ahead and put them in order of your most realistic setup for fill-ins for this Cardinals rotation. Maybe it's just the three we've mentioned. Maybe there's someone else that comes to mind. What would it look like for you to fill in for Dustin May and then, if needed, eventually Kyle Leahy?
If it's just May we're talking about, I would have to go to Dobbins just because we've seen him before and he's done this at this level and been able to be that fill-in for you. But I mean, Quinn Mathews is right there. He's knocking. So if they went with Mathews, I wouldn't be frustrated either. I would be happy with either one of Dobbins or Mathews should maybe gone. But if you end up getting a situation where Leahy is shut down too, then maybe you see both of them.
I think that I lean towards Quinn Mathews. The question is what does the 40-man spot look like? And, do you feel confident enough that once he's up, you're ready to roll with him? You want to make sure that he's ready, in my personal opinion. But also, we know that this time of year, post-trade deadline, last month or two of the year, can go a long way for these guys. Look what it did for Michael McGreevy to be able to get that experience last season. It was a little bit more spread out through the year, and then he got the full runway there the last couple of months of the season. But look how much that did for him. Imagine what it could do for Quinn Mathews, for Hunter Dobbins as well, but he's a little more familiar with the major league level. But imagine, let's say, Quinn Mathews, what it could do for him to be able to pitch at this level for 2 months this season. Listen, the stuff looks like it's ready to go. How much more can you wait? In my opinion, let's roll with it. Let's see what we have in Quinn Mathews, and let's start seeing this pitching talent leak to the major league rotation that you've been accruing over these past couple of seasons. Now, what you do with Brycen Mautz, I think that we both have a similar idea as to what that looks like. We're going to talk about it with key number 2 coming up on the other side. You're watching the Loose Sports Talk podcast.
Welcome back to the Loose Sports Talk on STL Sports Central. I am Dylan Hampel. He is Mr. Ethan Hannaford. So before the break, we talked ad nauseum about the improvements in the pitching rotation and what that needs to look like as we head into the second half of the season for the Cardinals. Now we're going to move on to this second key for the second half, the bullpen, the other half of the tandem in the pitching realm. So what to you, Ethan, needs to change the most for this bullpen as we head into the post-All-Star break games?
Oh, God, it just makes me sick, Dylan, because
the answer is, where do I start?
Here's the tough part about this bullpen. When you break it down individually, it's really not as bad as what comes to mind. JoJo Romero in his 43 innings, a 3.35 ERA. Riley O'Brien in his 40 innings, a 3.35 ERA. George Soriano, 42 innings, a 3.4 ERA. Justin Brule, 47 innings, 3.6 ERA. Graceffo, 48 innings, a 3.17 ERA. There's 5 of your 8 guys right there that are in the mid to high threes. They're really all in the mid threes right there. Matt Swanson, yes, it was bad early in the year. It's been a little bit better since coming back. Ryne Stanek, really bad at the beginning of the year, had a really strong stretch, has been teetering a little bit as of late. Luis Gastelum, very small sample size. This is a guy that, it's not even worth mentioning the ERA because he's thrown 5 or 6 innings up to this point in his major league career. But overall, I mean, it's not that there is necessarily one individual that you look at and you say, it's just been hideous from him all season long. It's more so what it feels like, Dylan, not being able to get complete nights from the bullpen, where it almost always feels like there's one guy that can't come through. And because the Cardinals play such tight margin games, it ends up hurting them a lot. St. Louis has a top 5 number of holds in Major League Baseball, while simultaneously being 25th in expected ERA. That is an insane number. And it gives you an idea as to how much this bullpen is having to be used, because it is a relatively young rotation. And especially early on in the season, Oli Marmol was having to use his bullpen, probably on average 4 innings per night, which is a pretty high number. So what does this bullpen need to do? I don't know if there's necessarily an answer right now. Even to start the second half, it feels like it's already been damage control, where we have seen even guys like Luis Gastelum, who, don't get me wrong, highly regarded, a lot of talent in that right arm. But he's also only pitched at the major league level a handful of times now, and we're already seeing him in high leverage situations in his 5th appearance of his major league career. And it just goes to show how careful they are having to be right now, because you do have guys that are gassed out already. I would imagine George Soriano hasn't thrown this many innings in his major league career, at least in an individual season, maybe just in his major league career, flat out up to this point. Riley O'Brien, similar situation. Joe Romero's had, this level of workload the past couple of years, but we know he's dealing with something. You're going to tell us about that here in just a second. Ryne Stanek just kind of is what he is at this point. I hate that that's the place that he's at, but that's just kind of where he is. So you tack up all of these things, and it's a bullpen that is getting worked a lot. 20th in ERA, 25th in expected ERA. 8th least amount of home runs given up is an encouraging sign, but they're 22nd in walks per 9 inning, and they don't strike guys out. Bottom third of the league in whip as well. So overall, you combine it all together, and it hasn't been enough. So where do they go from here? What do they do from here? I don't know if there's something you can say is along the lines of this guy needs to perform better, that guy needs to be better. Would I like Ryne Stanek to be able to step up a little bit more like we saw for that stretch? I don't have the numbers directly in front of me, but Ryne Stanek did have a good stretch of this season where the ERA was continuing to drop, and now it feels like it's just kind of sat in that high 4 spot. For one of your higher leverage pieces, that's just not good enough. So that part sucks. Outside of him, I don't know how much more you could be expecting from any of these guys compared to what you have gotten. And as I mentioned a moment ago, the situation with JoJo Romero, Dylan, makes it that much more difficult for multiple reasons.
Yes, JoJo Romero being sent to the 15-day IL, retroactive to July 14th, I believe it was, with appendicitis, which is a huge blow not only to the Cardinals bullpen, but also to his trade deadline appeal potentially, because he's been a name that's been in circulation for what feels like multiple deadlines now, and he was going to be one of your main, potential pieces on a platter for teams to be interested in. And this lack of innings now that's going to occur right in crunch time, if he does come back before the deadline, it'll be maybe for an appearance or two. He'll be right up against that deadline. So I think that is a concern, at least for me, having only one lefty out of the pen now, and Justin Brule, who has bounced back and been serviceable after a rough start to the season. And then you also have the potential of looking at post-deadline not having Riley O'Brien. If he's moved, it being an all-star and a high-leverage arm, that's always going to draw attention. So those are both TBD for Romero and O'Brien, but those are two names that will definitely be I'm Bloom will be receiving phone calls about this deadline, no question. I guess if there's no clear-cut, X and Y that this team can do to improve. These guys are kind of doing the best that they can with what they have and the amount of innings that they're being asked to cover. Where would you put your concern level at then, Ethan, if there's not a black and white picture of, they need to strike more people out or they need to walk less people, which every pitching staff would like to do? Where's your concern level at with this bullpen?
My concern level is a lot higher now than it was at the beginning of the season. And I think that I proved to be right at the beginning of the season when everyone was freaking out about how bad the bullpen was for the first couple of weeks of the year. That averaged out a little bit. That calmed down, and a lot of these guys did improve. The problem now is because they were being so overworked early in the season, if these guys were going to make the improvements, they probably would have made them by now. And a lot of them did. But now you have a whole separate issue going on, and that is fatigue from being all used so much up to this point in the season. I think that the solutions can potentially be, here's what comes to mind. Brycen Mautz comes in and ends up being a relief guy the rest of the year. I think that is a genuine option. Him being used out of the bullpen for the first time this season, this past weekend, I think makes that much more real. That is one. Trying to find someone that is not going to cost you much at the deadline that you can add is a potential option. I'm not sold that they will do that, but it is an option. Hopefully in the next week or two, they can have an idea as to how close JoJo Romero is. If they get a beat that JoJo Romero is going to be back in early August, I don't think he'll be back post or pre-trade deadline. I just think it's too quick. It's too soon for that injury and just how long the recovery time is. It would really surprise me. I think teams are going to be hesitant to trade for a guy that is currently healing from appendicitis. Question marks as to how long it'll take. That would surprise me. I guess I wouldn't put it at 0, but I would say the odds are pretty darn low now. The good news about that is that he's going to be on your roster probably later in the year. And that's a high leverage guy that you weren't planning on having. Now, maybe they end up still trading. I think Ryne Stanek is more likely to get traded than Riley O'Brien personally at this point, just because he is on a 1-year deal. So this is it. This is the expiring contract rather than compared to Riley O'Brien, who has a lot more control, several years of it, even though he's 31. I think he's a guy that the Cardinals look at and say could be a guy that is going to be at the back end for the next couple of years at least. I think that trying to have some addition by subtraction using a guy like Brycen Mautz that could provide some relief or a couple of options. Outside of that, it feels like it's survival season, Dylan, that you just have to find a way to get either to the deadline or to get back to JoJo Romero being in the bullpen, because outside of that, I'm not really sure what the answer is. And we've seen it even post All-Star break, how Ali Marmol has utilized some of these guys, using guys like Luis Gastelum in higher leverage situations, Matt Swanson even as well. In the first game back, he went with George Soriano and then I believe Gastelum rather than George Soriano and Ryne Stanek. He didn't use his 2 high leverage guys in that first appearance back because I think Ali Marmol and the pitching staff know we have to balance these guys out. We have to spread the wealth because there's not much of it right now. So tough situation, but it's the reality of where the Cardinals are at. And besides that, I don't know what the answer is. Do you have any thoughts as to what is a realistic area that this bullpen can improve outside of those two? Do you see it to either of those as realistic options?
The options you listed were what came to mind as we talked about. It seems like that Brycen Mautz is kind of being groomed for that spot to be that next lefty in the pen, depending on JoJo's recovery, as you mentioned. And the good thing about the deadline is that there are arms that are on the market and available. Obviously, it's not going to be a top of the line arm, high leverage closer the Cardinals are likely going to be pursuing, because this is when their cost is the most high.
Right.
But you're able to get someone who is serviceable. Arms are not the hardest to come by, and you have options within your system, as we've seen with the recent bring-ups of Blewett and Gastelum, as we've talked about. So I don't think that it's a majorly different concern level. At least for me, I think I've had a consistent concern level, and I was one of the overreactors early in the season that you touched on. But I think that it's definitely crunch time, as you said, as we head into the dog days. And if you have a guy like Kyle Leahy potentially, hitting his ceiling of innings, and then potentially losing out on the innings of Dustin May as well. So we'll see what happens. I mean, it's going to be an interesting 2 weeks heading into the deadline, and seeing if we see JoJo Romero or not. As you said, a little bit less likely than more likely, but there's not a direct answer of we have this exact guy to bring up and it'll be the answer to all of our problems. So it'll definitely be a situation that Cardinals fans will continue to stress about, and that will be fluid and continue to be monitored, because there's not a clear-cut answer. So I think we've hit everything we can on the bullpen. Let's move on now to the other key to the Cardinals' second half of the season. Some of the lineup concerns we talked about earlier in the episode, how the top four were very solid and outperformed expectations in many areas. And then beyond those top four, there's been some question marks, in one place or another in the lineup for the entire season. So how do you think the Cardinals combat these lineup concerns? Do you think they're getting enough from the lineup? Where can they improve at, in your opinion?
It's hard to look at this lineup and figure what needs to be better, especially when you look at the concerns going into the season was, where were they going to get their power? Well, Jordan Walker found that power. JJ Wetherholt is hitting to power-wise a level above what we expected him to. Outside of that, there hasn't been a load of it. Alec Burleson, yes, he'll probably end up as a 20 home run guy this season, but overall, it's still not a team where power is the strength. And we've seen that over these past couple of months. And I would argue, Dylan, that these issues have gotten more notable in the past month. If you go back a little bit farther than that, is where the trend started to being noticeable. If you date back to June 15th, which is a little bit over a month ago, the Cardinals' 26 home runs during that time is 29th in baseball, and their team OPS is 673, which is the bottom four in all of baseball. WRC plus also bottom four in all of baseball at 87, 13% below league average. So who has cooled down during that time? Well, Jordan Walker has cooled down, but he's still hitting very well. Let me make that clear. During that time, I believe the OPS is around 860 still. So he is not the problem whatsoever. I just want to make it clear that he's not at the 1,000 OPS that he was earlier in the season. As the year has gone on, which was expected, he has averaged out a little bit. Where have the problems actually come from? Well, the most notable one is Ivan Herrera, who has a lot of bigger issues going on, I think, when you look at the StatCast page and some of those things. But the general stats are this. Ever since June 15th, Ivan Herrera batting 180 with a WRC plus of 66, 34% below league average, and the OPS is only at 553. Talked about how good that 1 through 4 was in the first half of the year. Well, Ivan Herrera has been the trickling, leaking, kind of hanging off the edge piece of that lineup, of the top four of that lineup, that has been struggling. Listen, playing more games at the major league level than he ever has been. We know that he's best when he gets extended. Pitchers have enough tape on him now to know how to get him out. Why is he getting hit so much this year? It's because he's getting pitched more inside. So Ivan Herrera is going to have to make some adjustments at some point as to how he's going to be able to extend, get ahead of those pitches on the inner half of the plate a little bit more. If I'm a pitcher, I'm okay with hitting Ivan Herrera rather than a double to the gap or a home run to right center field. I imagine probably most pitchers are okay with that. So, it wouldn't surprise me if Ivan Herrera's hit by pitch numbers continue to be high throughout his major league career, because he's best when he's able to get extended, and he extends when the ball is on the outer half or over the plate. Pitchers are being a lot more conscientious of that with Ivan Herrera. So he's going to need to make some adjustments. Bottom of the lineup has been a pretty consistent struggle throughout most of the year for the Cardinals. At the beginning of the year in center field, Victor Scott was an offensive hole. Nathan Church was the better of the two. Nathan Church goes on the injured list, comes back, and is hitting well to start off his time returning from the IL. He has cooled off severely. The OPS is at 547. The WRC plus is at 50% below league average. Blaze Jordan's still very young in his career, and he hasn't even been starting nearly as much because Jose Fermin has been getting some of those starts. But Blaze Jordan has not really, if you want to talk about filling in for Nolan Gorman and production-wise, the numbers don't really prove that he has outside of those first handful of games when he was red hot. Adjusting to the major league level, it's going to take time. That was expected for a lot of these pieces over this season. But those are a handful of pieces that I look at and have cooled off. If you were to throw in another one, Alec Burleson has a little bit as well. Over the past month-ish, OPS is under 700. He's hitting about 10% below league average when you look at the WRC plus. So there are some holes. There are some guys that have come down to earth a little bit, have cooled down in this lineup. Some you can live with and say, yeah, it's expected. It's part of the game. Burley, even Herrera. I'm a little more concerned about some of his issues than I am Burleson's. Bottom of the lineup has been a weakness all season long. And at some point, that's going to be an area that the Cardinals need to try and improve upon in the offseason. I don't know if they're looking to the market yet, or they're just continuing to evaluate what they have in system. We know that there is some outfield talent that is in the organization and it's just not quite here yet, but hopefully will be soon. So those are the few areas, Dylan, that I see within this lineup that I think could use some improvement. What are your thoughts?
I think that my primary concern is just the overall depth. I mean, it's not like you're lacking guys that you can fill into spots. It's just that, are those guys you plug into those spots going to be serviceable? You mentioned Blaze Jordan, for example, filling in for Nolan Gorman hasn't been world-beating beside his first few games in the league. And same with Jimmy Crooks. I mean, it's basically had the same stint with the team that he's had last year offensively and has left much to be desired from the offensive side of the plate. So I think that my concern is that, you've had a couple position groups, third base and center field, that have been subpar compared to league average throughout the season, as you talked about with Gorman and Victor Scott. I think the Cardinals are second worst in baseball in wins above replacement from the third base position this season. I think they're at a -1.5 WAR the last time I checked. So that's obviously from the defensive side of the ball as well as offensive. But I think that if you start to have more positional struggles, throughout the lineup, whether it's your DH in Herrera or whether it's your first baseman in Alec Burleson, then the puzzle starts to fall apart a little bit, and it starts to become a little bit more of a concern. So I would just want to see some shoring up of those positions. And as you mentioned, the outfield talent, I'm assuming you're referring to Joshua Baez, who's on the way. He would be the hitter who's been far away the best at Memphis this season, but it may not be really time to bring him up in the next 2 weeks. I don't think you're going to see Joshua Baez on this team. So he would really be the only one that, you could circle as, okay, this is who we have that we could bring up and expect to be major league, average or better, but that's not going to be in the immediate future. So as you said, the bottom of the lineup has been trying to find it. I think Mason Wynn is starting to, it's been a rough last couple games for him, but I still think he's been serviceable. He's been comparable offensively to how he's been his previous seasons in the league. And Lars Nootbaar has been serviceable for the most part as well since coming back from the injured list. So hopefully you continue to get performance out of those two guys. And, outside of that, Jose Fermin has been above average offensively. I think a lot of Cardinals fans are understandably frustrated with his defensive play lately, but I think my main concern is just who are you going to have if some of these struggles continue? You don't really have an immediate answer, in my opinion, outside of Joshua Baez for who's going to be able to provide thump at the plate and who's going to be able to, hit for power, hit for average, and get runners in. So I know that was long-winded, but I think we're on the same page with that. Would you agree?
Yeah, I entirely would. And when you look back on the three biggest things that the Cardinals have to hold fast to if they are going to make it to the postseason, just to put a bow on this one, the first one is figuring out who is going to plug the holes that eventually this starting rotation is going to have, whether it be 1 or 2 holes. Dustin May more than likely is going to be gone at the trade deadline. What does it look like for Kyle Leahy? Who plugs those holes? How effectively do they plug them? That's number one. Number two, in my opinion, surviving until JoJo Romero returns. What does that look like? Does it look like potentially getting creative at the deadline? Does it look like using some of the minor league pitching talent that you have right now? I think that's the more likely option. That is number two. And then the final one, I think you have to continue to get what you've gotten in large part this season from 1 through 4 in your lineup. Helps that Lars Nootbaar is there. Helps that Mason Wynn is hitting a little bit more effectively than he was for a large chunk of the season. You've got to be, your 1 through 4 has to continue to be your rock. And it's hard when Ivan Herrera has been as ice cold as he has been. So I would argue there's a lot of pressure right now on Ivan Herrera to get back into shape as far as making these adjustments. But we'll see what it looks like the remainder of the year. It's a very important couple of weeks for the Cardinals as Chaim Bloom looks to decide what the short-term direction of this team looks like. JoJo Romero, Dustin May, Ryne Stanek, Riley O'Brien, Lars Nootbaar, several names that have been in the rumor mill for the trade deadline to be moved on August 3rd or in the days leading up to the 3rd. Who gets moved? That is what next week's episode will be discussing. So be sure to like and subscribe to STL Sports Central. Follow us on all of our social media pages at @LouSportsTalk_ on Instagram, X, and Facebook. Been a fun one. He's Dylan Hampel. I'm Ethan Hannaford. Episode number 121. That's a wrap.